Some years ago, a religious coalition led by Reverend Jim Ball launched a media campaign asking Americans the question, what would Jesus drive? The advertisement, designed to discourage religious people from driving SUVs and pickups and minivans and other gas-guzzling vehicles, quickly captured the attention of Americans. To which the three major automakers publicly made a statement that they already made 50 models of fuel-efficient cars, but trucks and SUVs still led the sales across most showrooms across America. One late-night comedian said Jesus would obviously drive a big truck since he was in the construction business and already had 12 employees. Biblical literalists quickly announced that Jesus would drive a Honda and wouldn't talk about it, citing John's Gospel, chapter 12, verse 49, where Jesus says, "I did not speak of my own accord." Evangelist Pat Robertson said the whole discussion was offensive and blasphemous, but some environmental advocates reminded us that, well, the donkey that Jesus rode got 50 miles for every bale of hay, which would be environmentally friendly. But before we ask you to check your keys at the door, let me consider the question in a bit broader context. What would Jesus say about our materialism? I ask that because it seems to be the one thing that inhibits us from being the kind of generous people that people of faith ought to be. And I looked this morning to this little parable to give me some advice about how to live my life. It's a simple parable. It's one of 16 parables that Jesus told about money and possessions. But it's really about how we're supposed to live our life. And isn't that why you came to church this morning? Give me some wisdom from the greatest teacher of all about how I can live a life that's truly worth living. So that's what we'll talk about. This little parable reminds me that work is worthwhile. Not everybody believes that in today's world, but work is worthwhile. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop, it says in verse 16. My friend Tom's a farmer in Clark County, and for 65 years he dug out a living for himself and his family by the sweat of his brow and the labor of his hands. And even today his big hands are scarred and gnarled and rough and calloused because of the labor that he did with them on that farm. Now his wife liked to entertain preachers on Sundays, and I'll not forget the one Sunday afternoon that she invited me over to be entertained. I was gazing at that ridge of green pasture on that farm with the cows grazing in the background, and in my most profound preacher voice I said to Tom, "God surely has given you a beautiful farm." To which my friend Tom replied, "Yeah, and you should have seen it when God had it by himself." In the creation story in Genesis, the Bible says that the Lord took Adam and put him in the Garden of Eden to work and to take care of it. Work's not a curse. Work is a command of God for the good of humankind. Work is a partnership with the divine for the good of all creation. Work is a good thing. My friend David Mosser says that work has to do with livelihood, with inclusion in the community, and with a sense of personal dignity and well-being. A humanizing economy depends on the creation of meaningful work for everybody who can work and wants to work. Day by day, I rejoice I have a job of meaning, and I ponder the ways every morning how I can do it better, because ultimately, I think God will hold me accountable, and ultimately, I'm only accountable to God for what I do. But hardworking people are usually successful people. Success is not a sin. Work is a good thing, despite the fact that some people want to interpret the Bible differently. Work is worthwhile. What you do is good. But this little parable where Jesus taught his followers reminds me that success is a responsibility. If you do well with your work, then what are you going to do? That's the dilemma this farmer finds himself in. So in verse 17 he asks, "What shall I do?" With the success of the day comes the question of the night. Now that I've acquired all this, what do I do with it? The benefits of the day become the concerns of the night if you're successful. A little later in the chapter, Jesus will say this: "From everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded. And from the one who has been entrusted with much, even much more will be asked." It was a vulnerable moment. I stood beside the casket with the widow. It was the first time she had seen the bodily remains of her very successful but now deceased husband. We stood there in silence, and after a while, she broke the silence of the room and looked at me and said, "George, he's smiling. He's laughing. He always said he would leave me his business, and now he has, and now he's lying there in that casket just laughing at me." You see, she was beginning to feel the pain of the responsibility of what success brings. And some of you have known that. Success brings serious Christian responsibility. I've come to believe that the greater the number of things, the deeper our need for spiritual values. Because I want you to leave with just one thing, let me say that one again. The greater the number of things we have, the deeper our need for spiritual values to know what to do with them. If you don't think that God has anything to say about your monetary affairs, then maybe you ought to read the Bible again. Because Jesus talked more about possessions and money than he did about heaven and hell. He had 500 verses where he talked about prayer, a little less than that he talked about faith, but 2,000 verses where he talked about money. One of the problems in America is that we have removed God from the question of economy, both public and private. Does faith have anything to say about the vehicle I drive? Does faith have anything to say about the place that I live? Does faith have anything to say about the community in which I raise my children? We've assumed not, but we've assumed wrong. The beginning of the farmer's demise was in the question that he asked, "What shall I do? I have all these things, what shall I do?" Now, if you ask the wrong question, you will always get the wrong answer. If you like to count, there are 21 personal pronouns in the 5 verses that contain this short parable of Jesus. When you ask the wrong question, you'll get the wrong answer. And he's asking the wrong question: what shall I do? If you reframe the question this way, what's the will of God for the matter that is before me? It's to rephrase the question as a matter of faith. And to ask the question is to bring faith to bear on all my decisions. And that's stewardship. Success is a sacred responsibility. When you start asking the questions, they're stewardship questions. More doesn't make us merrier. Did you hear that from Jesus' teaching this morning? More will not make you merrier. Says the farmer, "This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns, I'll build bigger ones, and I can accumulate plenty of good things for the many years that are to come so that I can take life easy, and then I can eat, drink, and be merry." Jesus calls such thinking foolish. No, he's stronger than that. He says you're a fool for thinking such things because it won't work. More won't make you merrier. In the Peanuts cartoon, Charlie Brown and Linus are reflecting one day about the day that's just passed. And Charlie Brown says to his friend Linus, "Didn't we have a great day today? Did I make you happy, Linus?" And Linus looks at Charlie Brown and responds, "Charlie Brown, I think I'm about one cookie short of being happy." A market society has made consumers of us all, no matter what your age or stage or position in life. It's convinced us we're all just about one cookie short of being happy. When I had only one son, he was 4 years old, we went to Florida for our annual vacation. He immediately found the toy store down the road from the condo that we were staying in. And of course, he said, "Daddy, can we go to the toy store?" And I said, "Well, of course we can go to the toy store, Zachary." He began to play with all the free stuff and entertain himself for a while. And then naturally he said, "Daddy, can I buy a toy?" And as a good, loving father wanting to please my son, I said, "Of course you can buy a toy." He picked out a toy. He took it back to the condo. He had fun that night. The next morning, straight into my bed jumped my 4-year-old son. "Daddy, can we go back to the toy store? I need to buy another toy." I said, "Well, of course we can go back to the toy store, Zachary, but I need to tell you something. When we go back to the toy store today, we're going to go back and look, and we're not going to buy anything." "But Daddy, I need to buy something today." So we went to the toy store, and he played with the free things, and after a while I said, "Zachary, it's time to go." He said, "Daddy, I need to buy something." And I said, "No, Zachary. Remember, we said today we're not coming to buy. Today we're just coming to look." And he fell down on the floor and had a temper tantrum that only a 4-year-old can have. I'm sure he got that from his mother's side. He didn't get it from me. I thought to myself, here's a 4-year-old child who couldn't even tell me what it was he wanted. He just said, "I need something because I'm in this store." I ask you, is that human nature? Or is that American marketing so embedded into a 4-year-old child's psyche that his wants have become needs, driven by a gnawing desire for something that's impossible for him to articulate? Someone said we're a country of expanding wealth but shrinking spirits. Makeovers will not make you a beautiful person. Exotic vacations will not give you a sense of peace. Big houses don't guarantee happy families. And expensive gifts don't buy love. Boomers born by the mantra of the one who has the most toys wins are now reaching the stage of life where the issue of life becomes, where can I find a place big enough to keep all the toys I have? But more doesn't make merrier. This little parable teaches me something else. It teaches me that a legacy is more than a living. The whole thing is prompted by an argument over inheritance. Does that sound familiar to you, that the more things change, the more they stay the same? What prompts the teaching of this parable is a squabble over inheritance. But Jesus said, I'm not going to get involved in that argument. I'm not going to make myself the arbitrator of the divisions in this family. And yet, he tells a story, and at the end of the story, he has this haunting verse in verse 20. Who will get what you meant for yourself? Who will get what you meant to keep for yourself? Think about that. It prompts a couple of things for me. What are we leaving for our future generation? There's a bumper sticker that you'll see from time to time that says, I'm spending my children's inheritance. Well, if it's just money, go ahead and spend it. But if it's a livelihood, then we're fools to spend our children's inheritance. Someone said that if people in waste were laid side to side across the United States of America, each square mile of the nation would contain 56 people surrounded by 54 tons of rubbish, including 3 junked cars and 26 discarded tires and 8,500 bottles and 17,000 cans and 1 ton of plastics and 8.5 tons of paper. Is that what the generations that follow us want? And it prompts this question. Are we investing in that which will outlast us? Now, you have to make a decision whether this scripture will influence you at all, what authority the Bible has in the way you live and what you believe and the decisions you make about what you'll give. But if you take the Bible seriously, this is one of those places where there doesn't seem to be any ambivalence in Jesus. He says it as clearly as he can. Don't store up for yourselves treasures on this earth where moth and rust destroy and thieves break in and steal. But instead, store up for yourself treasures in heaven where moth and rust will never destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Now, we've assumed that people's money follows their heart. Get people interested, then you'll get their money. But Jesus said we don't have it right, and he wants to turn it right side up for us in this little teaching. The heart, he says, always follows the money. If you want to know what's most important in your life, the next time you do your taxes, just look at how you spent your money. You'll see. The longer I live, the more convinced I am there are two types of people in this world. There are the givers and there are the getters. And the real point of the discussion this morning about materialism is to leave you with some questions. The real point of materialism is not how much we have, but what has us. The real point of materialism is not how much we hold, but how tightly we hold it. The real point of materialism is not how much we got, but how we got it. The real test of materialism is whether our goods have made us proud or grateful. The real test of materialism is whether it makes us self-sufficient or God-dependent. Are we striving for selfish gain, or are we striving for common good? You see, that's a stewardship question that'll shape your life, not just how much you give to the church. For many people in England, when John Wesley began to preach, those who were converted were largely from the lower socio-economic class of English culture. But they found almost instant success when they came to say, we belong to God. Well, after all, they replaced boozing and gambling and wasting money with hard work and family life and devotion to God. What else would you expect? And as a result, they began to climb up the ladder of success. That worried Mr. Wesley. It worried the founder of our church. What would happen when people climbed up the ladder of success? And so he gave them this advice. It's the duty of every man to work as hard as he can, to make as much money as he can, to spend as little as possible so he can give away all that he can. May we who call ourselves Methodist dare to do likewise. We're on this journey of walking the path. And the prayer I ask you to make as you make that decision about your giving is to pray to God, God, what would you have me do with the stuff that I have? And that's what the song's about. If you want to make a decision to be part of a church that sees faith this way, if you want to know what Christ might mean to make a difference in your living, this altar's open. I would invite you to come. And as you're able, I'd invite you to stand as we sing our closing hymn.